Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started in a few minutes, so hold tight. And please let me know if you are seeing the correct screen. There should be the PowerPoint starting slide up, so please let me know that you all can see that. Just say yes in the chat so I can make sure that my screens are working properly this morning. Thanks. Great, great. So thanks, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. I just want to be mindful of time. We have a decent amount to discuss today. Not quite sure whether we'll hit time, but I do want to leave room for questions if there are any. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. And if for some reason you can't hear me or the screen disappears, let me know. Typically, I try to go into the office to do these monthly webinars, but today I am doing it from home. So the setup's a bit different. Hence why I'm asking folks to keep me updated in the chat should anything weird happen tech-wise. So I appreciate everyone's participation in that. So first item I would like to discuss this morning with you all is the biennial budget. As you all should be aware, the budget is still in the House. Last webinar, I know I discussed that the portion of the budget that we're really focusing on this time around is student wellness and success. 2 years ago in the last budget, we had student wellness and success dollars, and then we also had this K through 12 prevention funding that we were fighting for. And later in the budget process, our efforts actually were more focused on the K through 12 than student wellness and success, mostly because the list of uses for these student wellness and success dollars did not include prevention. It was a complaint, but at the time, given where the budget bill was, it wouldn't have made sense to try to get prevention into those uses, given that we also had that separate pot of money in student wellness and success. But this time around, as a recap, the K through 12 dollars that were in the last budget are no longer in the budget. Those were one-time funds. But the intent and the efforts behind those dollars were shifted into student wellness and success. So this time around, student wellness and success, all those funds have prevention and prevention services listed as one of the uses. It also has prevention groups, local groups, as one of the possible partners a school can or a district can partner with in order to develop the student wellness and success plans. Now, a few weeks ago, Prevention Action Alliance submitted an amendment for that funding. And the purpose of that amendment was to connect, at least when it comes to the verbiage in the bill, the student wellness and success plan, like the purpose behind the plan and the plan itself, to not only every school's improvement plan, so the metrics that they're trying to hit as a school, as a district, year in, year out, but we also wanted it to connect to this thing called the Whole Child Framework, which the Department of Education developed, which essentially is a new framework that schools should operate under, saying that schools, in order to support the whole child, schools need to partner with the families, they need to partner with community groups to make sure that every part of the child is supported. And obviously that includes behavioral health support, which includes our folks. So, and after having conversations yesterday, I was told that the way that the bill currently reads, the Department of Education is already operating under that assumption. However, for us, having that clearly spelled out in an amendment in the bill removes any room of confusion. Saying, look, schools, when you're developing these plans for student wellness and success, you're going to get a lot of money rolling into your coffers. Please make sure you're using those funds to supplement, to add resources to support the whole child, as opposed to using them to supplant, which is an issue that we ran into last time around. I heard from a couple folks. Obviously, not all the schools engaged in supplantation of those funds, which means, they continued paying their counselor. They ended up just swapping in student wellness and success funds to pay their counselor. And with these newly freed funds in their operating budget, they, redid their track or refurbished their library or, put down a turf field for their soccer team. That's what happened in some places throughout the state where schools were supplanting. But for the most part, there was an increase in services, behavioral health services, and just health services in general for students throughout the state. That's what we're hearing. But we wanted to make sure that this time around, schools were incentivized as much as possible to utilize these funds properly. So we submitted an amendment. This week, the General Assembly is coming back from 2-week break. They took a 2-week break the previous 2 weeks for spring break. This is their first week back from that break, and we are expecting to see the sub-bill dropped, hopefully today, and that'll give us a sense of, A, did they accept our amendment, and if so, how do we move forward? So you'll see that on the slide. Before I get into House Bill 1, the school funding bill, and how that might cause issues, we are also considering a second amendment. That for those of you who were on the call last month, you all will remember, Jody Salvo recommended possibly asking schools to engage in the collection of behavioral health data to show how important the proper use of those funds are and to help increase proper use of those funds. So we had a couple internal conversations, a few stakeholder conversations with ESCs, and we have not language drafted, but we have an idea of what that language would look like. Essentially saying, hey, schools, when you're building these funds, when you're building a plan to utilize these funds with partners in your area, which include the boards, ESCs, health departments, prevent coalitions, you name it, part of those plans need to include data collection. But we didn't want to be too restrictive, right? So if you are already doing data collection, I know, for example, Wood County does great data collection, you all can continue doing that data collection and include and use these funds to help with that. If you are in an area of the state that does not do data collection at all, these funds should be utilized to some degree to either start that or develop a plan to start that. So that's kind of the language that we're looking at. With home rule in this state, telling schools to do X, Y, or Z always gets tricky. Schools don't like mandates. They push back very hard. But obviously, there needs to be a balance struck. So we're trying to find this balance to say, hey, schools, please engage in this data collection. We're not going to tell you what surveys to use, but we want to be good. There are other areas in the state that are doing great data collection. Please lean on those other spaces and share that information so you all can also engage in great data collection. So that's the plan. We have no idea whether that plan is going to be feasible, but it is something that we discussed last legislative webinar. And I wanted to let you guys know that there is progress on that. It's just a bit tricky with schools, as I'm sure you all know, but especially on the legislative side. The General Assembly wants to put guardrails, but the school really wants the freedom to do what they need to do with these funds, right? So it's a bit difficult. So what might end up happening is the shift from legislative advocacy at the state level will probably shift to local. Once the budget is passed, there will probably be an ask for coalitions to really engage these schools to make sure this time around that they're using it. But I'm hoping with the tweaks in the language this time around, that implementation and use of these funds is better than last time, right? That's really what we need to hope for, is we make it a little better every time and that these funds continue to roll through for future budgets. One issue with the budget bill, and especially student wellness and success, that we're keeping a close eye on is the school funding bill, House Bill 1. That I do not believe, I might have mentioned early this year, maybe in the January, February webinar, but House Bill 1 is a school funding bill sponsored by the Speaker of the House, so Speaker Cupp. They're completely redoing how schools are funded. So currently, the way schools are funded in our state, it's unconstitutional. It's been that way for a while, and the General Assembly has failed to address it for a while. Finally, they're looking at a fix. So through the work of numerous stakeholders, different associations, they came up with House Bill 1. If you're curious, feel free to look up House Bill 1, 134th Ohio General Assembly. It should pull it up. If you have an issue finding it, I can help you find that. But this school funding formula includes funding and services for behavioral health. The reason why this may be an issue for us is because the rumor is that the General Assembly, especially the Speaker of the House, is looking to pull funds from student wellness and success into the school funding formula. Because right now, the school funding formula isn't fully funded, and they need that kind of startup money to get it rolling. So the fear is that they're going to pull student wellness and success, they're going to take those funds, put it into the school funding formula and into the school funding bill, and the robust nature of the student wellness and success funding language, which says, hey, you need to partner with these groups, the plans need to look like this, we lose all that because it's a completely different bill. The way that they're stating the recommendations and what schools need to do is completely different, and we're going to lose that language on partnerships. We're going to lose that language on uses, right? So we're keeping a close eye on that. I've been told that the House wants to include that into the budget bill and replace student wellness and success with the school funding bill. I've also been told that the Senate isn't necessarily a fan of that, and they're kind of in their own space. So as of right now, we have no idea how that's going to shake out. But depending on what the sub bill looks like this week, we're going to have to do a bit of scrambling to make sure that the intent and the purpose behind the student wellness and success dollars remains, regardless of how the language ends up looking, whether the school funding bill actually gets into the budget bill and gets passed out. We just need to make sure that the partnerships that we're asking schools to make with the boards, ESCs, health departments, and prevention folks, and the uses, which include prevention work for those funds, remain. So that's going to be our goal. That's where we are with the biennial budget. Did anybody have any questions on that? If you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat. You could also unmute yourself. That's fine as well. So I'll give a minute to see if there are any questions on that.
Do we know how long this process will take to go through this House Bill 1? I'm assuming we're in preliminary stages at this point. So do we think that whatever this ends up looking like, will it be implemented in next school year, or are we further out than that?
That's a great question. I have to double check. I think we're looking at next school year. Again, I have to look at the legislation because I'm sure they have timelines in there and it's pretty long. So I haven't taken a complete look at it. But I mean, we'll see. I mean, then again, if this House Bill 1 gets lumped into the budget, that timeline may be shifted a bit. So I don't know. But that's a great question, Oni. I'll get back to you all on that. But what I can say is this bill was introduced last General Assembly. So I believe they're saying once the school funding formula, bill is passed, I think portions of the bill will be effective within the next school year, and then it'll kind of, depending on how complex it is, it may be, a couple school years out. So maybe they're looking at 2023, 2024 for the complete bill to go into effect. But for long bills like that tends to be how it works. You have parts of the bill effective before others. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, any other questions? Awesome. Okay. So moving on, where's my cursor here? Yeah, so bills we are currently tracking. Just wanted to kind of run through the bills we're tracking, at least the bills that I want you all to keep a close eye on. Usually in a standard General Assembly, I mean, there are 100+ bills that I track. Many of them don't go anywhere. So the ones that you see here and the ones that you'll see in my weekly legislative updates are the ones that either are closest to the work that we do or the ones that are closest to passing or have already passed. So the first one, House Bill 5, chemical dependency. This bill, when it was introduced, wasn't a bill that we were tracking at all. It had to do with like chemical dependency credentials and stuff outside of our scope. The only reason I have it here now is because it now changes who can supervise prevention services. It actually eliminates, I believe, the 3 general chemical dependency licenses. So we're not talking about social work licenses. We're talking about, I think, chemical dependency like 2 and 3 or something like that. And after talking to folks, I know for those of you who were in PGNO's ethics training 2 weeks back, I know we had a long discussion about this. This is a good bill for us. It really, shores up the prevention licensure, kind of reining in who can oversee those services to make sure that the people who are overseeing prevention services know prevention, essentially. So this kind of cuts that back just a bit. And if folks have more questions about that, feel free to ask me. But if you go Google House Bill 5, 134th General Assembly, and go to the analysis, again, you'll be able to see at the very bottom the 3 licenses that they remove from that supervisory role. HB 9, dextromethorphan sales. So DXM is a chemical or component of cough medication that youth have abused for years. This essentially just says that you have to be 18 or have a doctor's note in order to buy cough medication. So, just simply trying to limit that access. So this bill currently is in the Senate. It's had 3 hearings. It hasn't moved in a couple of weeks, so we're waiting to see how this moves. But yeah, I mean, PA is supportive of that. Senate Bill 22, and really I should have this on the next page, but health orders, for those of you who are, politically savvy and keep up with these sorts of things, this bill passed out the General Assembly, was vetoed by the governor, and then the veto was overridden. And this bill essentially creates an internal joint committee in the General Assembly so they can oversee health orders, future health orders that the Department of Health puts out, essentially saying, hey, the Department of Health can only submit a health order, I believe, for 3 months, and then in order to continue that health order, it needs to be approved by the General Assembly. Terrible bill, absolutely terrible. Not happy it got overwritten, but that's kind of how this General Assembly is. They were not a fan of all the health orders that the governor and the Department of Health put out to protect us from the pandemic. And as a result, now they have created a process for themselves to be looped into that. So we'll see how that goes moving forward. The governor was not a fan of that at all. He really wasn't able to get any concessions. So really the General Assembly was pretty strong in this stance, and it didn't take any concessions from anybody or any recommendations from anybody about how to really craft this. So that's where that bill is. It's passed. And I believe it goes into effect. I have to double check, actually. It should go into effect within like the next month or so, because I don't think it had an emergency clause. But I'll double check that for you all, and we'll report back. House Bill 60, medical marijuana. So this bill has to do with the medical marijuana program and the autism spectrum disorder. Essentially, the autism spectrum disorder folks want the condition of autism to be listed as one of the qualified, qualifying conditions for the medical marijuana program. Obviously, there is not enough research to support all that, but the General Assembly, the way that they see it is, well, there are some states that already do it. We've already created a list of qualifying conditions when we created the program in the past. And this is something that they've been advocating for a long time. And the lack of research is really due to the federal government and the way that research on marijuana can't really fully be funded because of its schedule, when it comes to the federal schedule drugs and things of that nature. So they're trying to push to have the autism spectrum disorder as a qualifying condition for medical marijuana. I believe this bill has had 2 hearings. I don't think it's had an opponent hearing yet. I will say that PAA, because of the complexity of the medical marijuana fight, and because we're really waiting to hear back from the medical board to see, what they're saying, we're remaining an interested party on this. Because issues like this can be a bit tricky. So that's where PAA is. We're an interested party. We're keeping a close eye on it, but really want to hear what the medical board has to say. Because I don't think they've spoken out about this at all yet, not from what I've seen. But if anyone sees any articles on that and that they want to send me, feel free. But we're really waiting to see what they say about it. Tony, any questions?
JP, to interrupt.
Yes.
Who did you say is sponsoring this bill? You said the Autism Society. Who is?
It's a series of groups. It's not just one, but it's folks who side. You have parent advocates. Parents of kids with autism. We have a few physicians on there, so it's a mixed group, but they're all on the side of we need the autism spectrum disorder as a qualifying condition.
Okay, I just wondered if there was a specific group that was kind of leading that, if they were called something specific.
So I can take let me take a quick look to see. Let me pause my share very quickly, because from what I can tell, it's not necessarily a specific group.
Okay.
But it's kind of like a mix of groups.
Okay, yeah, I just wondered if it was like the Autism Society of Ohio or some.
Right. Okay, let me see here. Committees. See, proponent of Hope Grows for Autism, the International Women's Cannabis Coalition, Compassionate Cleveland, Autism Alliance of Ohio. So I would say, maybe that is the closest thing to kind of like a main group, the Autism Alliance of Ohio. But again, it's a bunch of different folks. A lot of them are individuals, some of them are physicians. But yeah, those are the folks backing. But when it comes to organizations, I guess Bene Leaves, I have no idea what that is. Hope Grows for Autism, the International Women's Cannabis Coalition, Compassionate Cleveland, and Autism Alliance of Ohio are the groups that I see listed as, proponents for this. So hopefully that helps. Okay, cool. Okay, so I will move on very quickly. Here's the rest of the bills that we're looking at. House Bill 205 and skipping House Bill 218, Senate Bill 126 are both hazing bills that were drafted in response to the recent hazing death of that student at I believe Bowling Green. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And these are 2 bills that we support, essentially adding consequences for individuals who engage in hazing, and making sure that schools have the proper educational campaigns in place to prevent hazing. And this is really going to be the responsibility of the Department of Higher Education to make sure that they implement these campaigns and spread the word about the dangers of hazing and things of that nature. So Those are two bills that were just introduced. Senate Bill 126 already had a second hearing. We submitted proponent testimony. House Bill 205 is having a hearing this week. House Bill 218, statewide curfews. This bill essentially removes all the curfew requirements from businesses that sell alcohol. So we're talking about bars and clubs and stuff like that. So it's trying to just reverse all those curfews, take them away. The sneaky thing about this bill, though, is there is a provision in there that would allow bars to push their last call to 3 a.m. instead of 2 a.m. And if you'll probably remember last General Assembly in the winter, we had a big fight against two House bills. Well, it was three at first, and it became two House bills that were trying to change alcohol rules and regulations. One of those were changing the last call on the weekends from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. Right? We won that fight, got that language removed, but now they're trying to sneak it into statewide curfews bill, which we ended up catching anyway. So I mean, it didn't work to their benefit. But we're keeping a close eye on that, obviously. I don't know why they're only choosing to do the 1 hour instead of the 2 hour. I'm assuming it's because most research talks about the increase in harm at that 2 hour increment. So I think for them, they're saying, well, if we do 1 hour, that kind of defeats the behavioral health, or I guess just general health argument against these sorts of things, which it doesn't. But that's probably where they're coming from while they're choosing to go after 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. this time around. But this bill was just introduced. Only one sponsor. I don't think it's going to get much traction, especially once we start speaking up against it. But please keep an eye out for that. And then Senate concurrent resolution number 4. I believe that's the racism as a public health crisis. It hasn't moved at all, but we're keeping a close eye on that. Spirits liquor home delivery. So last General Assembly, House Bill 674 passed out. That was one of the alcohol bills that we had a big fight with. And in that bill, in the final version, they added that agency stores, so in the state of Ohio, liquor is primarily sold by agency stores. I mean, obviously you have your micro distilleries that can purchase it from agency stores, but liquor is owned by the state in Ohio. So House Bill 674 had a provision in there that would allow state agency liquor stores to ship liquor to consumers directly. Currently in the state, we are allowed to do that with beer. We're allowed to do that with wine, but liquor is new. Obviously, Prevention Action Alliance had an issue with it. We spoke up against the issues that something like that would have. And in response to kind of give both our side and the micro distilleries and Jobs Ohio and everyone else who's interested in liquor a compromise, they decided to kind of punt that responsibility to the Division of Liquor Control, saying, okay, we're going to allow for this, but the Division of Liquor Control has to create rules about, what goes into this process or not. So 2 weeks ago, Prevention Action Alliance submitted a letter to the superintendent of the Division of Liquor Control listing what we would like to see in an e-commerce system for liquor delivery. And we had everything. I mean, we had a radial limit on how far out agency stores can deliver, because we don't want folks in Cleveland to be ordering liquor from Columbus. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. We talked about proper ID checking. We talked about the training of drivers. We talked about proper labeling of the shipping boxes. We talked about revenue for the licenses, and creating a new alcohol environment with this process. We need more revenue. And we talked about compliance checks as well. So there were a bunch of things that we listed in that letter. The bill became effective yesterday, and we received an email from the Department of Commerce because they're in their 5-year review for all their rules, and they're trying to kind of include this rule in that process. So that conversation is ongoing, but we'll keep an eye out on that. We'll be involved in that, and we'll keep you guys updated. So last two things. One, Prevention Action Alliance has created a marijuana education survey. With the recent developments in the marijuana space in New York and Virginia, the marijuana fight is coming to Ohio fast and quick. I expect for there to be a ballot initiative announced soon, and I'm sure they're already trying to gather the signatures for that. So the department and Prevention Action Alliance developed a survey to see where the gaps are statewide for marijuana education and what you all would like to see in a marijuana education campaign. So that is what we developed. First 200 respondents get a $10 Amazon gift card. Where the data that we're collecting, the info that we're collecting include challenges that communities face in addressing marijuana use, community readiness, assets, collateral, just kind of all those bullets over here. So we asked that the folks on this call take that survey, share the survey with your partners. I will put the survey link in the chat at the end of this so that you all have it. And you'll also see communication from PA on this survey in the coming weeks. And the last thing, Prevention Action Alliance is hosting an advocacy summit on racism on May 20th. There will be CEs. It will go from 9 to 5. But essentially, it'll be a conversation that we will have with not only prevention folks, we're hoping to get other areas as well, law enforcement, teachers, school officials, the whole gamut, to really have a conversation about race, have a conversation about what's going on currently in our country. Our opening keynote will be Reverend Dr. Starsky Wilson, who is the CEO of the Children's Defense Fund. We have Simone Crawley doing a session on cultural competency, cultural humility. We have Dr. Chanel Jones doing a session on the criminal justice system and reimagining community safety. And we have Dr. Dean doing one on racism as a public health crisis, the history of race in health. And then we're closing out with Dr. Wanda Boone with her closing keynote, including a call to action. We will also have a video submission from Representative Joyce Beatty. And we're actually also having a video performance from the distinguished gentleman of the spoken word to kick us off at the beginning of the day. So it's a robust conference. Please, everyone, if you're free, register. The registration fee is $49, and registration is live. So I will submit the registration link for this conference on May 20th in the chat as well, and you'll see continuing communication and marketing from PAA for this conference. I know we are over time, so for those of you who are able to stay, I appreciate it. I'm going to leave this webinar open for any questions that you all might have as I kind of search for those links and put those links in the chat for you all. But if you don't have any questions, thank you so much for hopping on today's call. Please let me know if you have any questions afterwards. I'll put my email in the chat as well, and I'll see you guys next month. Thank you. Hi, Angela. Just very quickly, yes, the survey link should be live. Let me know if you have any questions about that. Um, we do have some language that you can kind of put into an email to make things easier for you. And I'll just kind of plop that in the chat for you so you can kind of copy and paste that um, into your email. But here's the language that we provide, that we develop for folks who want to include in their email. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, JP. Of course, the 1 minute that I unmute, I get a bark here on my end.
Oh, you're fine.
We've got our coalition meeting next week, but I always send out the meeting packet. So I would love to be able to send that out today with a note for everyone to make sure that they look at the survey even before the meeting next week.
Got it. Yeah, that would be extremely helpful. So thank you for doing that.
Sure. Thank you.
Of course.
Bye-bye.